Welcome back to our Money Talk series where we are having conversations about money that actually matter. Now, before we get into today's episode, just want to remind you of our tax filing checklist. This is a completely free resource for you that will help you get all of your files organized and ready for tax season. Taxes can be a very, very stressful time. And so this checklist is here for you to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward when preparing for your taxes. So make sure to head to our description to download. And without further ado, let's get into it. Only one word can describe today's episode on the Unbreakable Business Podcast, and that is gold. This episode is pure gold. Ashlyn Carter, who is a copywriter, joins us on the show to talk about pricing strategy. And she does an incredible job breaking down her foolproof formula of how business owners can set up their pricing, common pricing mistakes business owners are making, and we get to hear her own pricing journey as an entrepreneur. Like I said, this conversation is filled with so many tangible tips, and you are going to enjoy this episode just as much as I did. So let's get into it. Ashlyn, welcome to the Unbreakable Business Podcast. I'm so excited that you are here. How are we doing?
I'm so pumped. I love being on this. I'm such a HoneyBook stan, have been for a long time, and I love the combos y'all bring to the table.
Yeah, but we love you, girl. That's why we brought you back. So we're so excited that you're here. And you guys, definitely we will link it in the show notes, but Ashlyn did an amazing episode on the Independent Business Podcast. And I just loved we were talking about your story and just how you honestly have built the business that you have today. And it was just so phenomenal and just so real, so transparent. And so y'all definitely go back and listen to this episode, but we had to bring her back because one thing about Ashlyn, she delivers, okay? She literally delivers. So we are talking about today all about pricing strategy. And so we were like, Ashlyn is the perfect person. So y'all, I'm so excited because you're going to be in for a treat. And Ashlyn, thank you again for being here.
I love it. Absolutely. Pricing as a words girl, I've made every mistake you can and have learned from it. So I'm here to hopefully share a lot of that.
Yes. Okay. So this is what I want to start the episode off with.
Okay.
We always hear the term, always the saying, charge your worth, then add tax. Do you agree or disagree?
Literally vomit. So the problem with that phrase is it ignores economic principles. When you're charge what you're worth, first of all, like you are, I believe, created by God. Like you have innate value. You've got value. You need to disconnect that and look at the actual craft itself, the thing that you do, and what the cost of goods are to get that. So you have to start with a realistic look at what the market demand is for it and what is average going rate for anything. So you could be the best, like the whole charge what you're worth. You could be the best, like underwater ballet basket weaving instructor ever, but like if the market doesn't want that, we have to take that into consideration. So I think a better pricing look is if you can look at the cost of goods for it, and then typically I would say that is about 40% of the price. The rest, the 60%, the rest of it, that includes your taxes, that includes the profit, that's going to include any reinvesting in your business. So that's a better formula to go off of than the whole charge what you're worth, add taxes thing.
I love that because I think, again, it makes us be more strategic and think more logically about our pricing because if like charge your worth and then add tax, like it's
What does that
based
even
off of
mean?
feeling. Yeah, like, yes, facts. And it's based off of feeling. And I just said it 2 days ago to somebody. I'm like, charge your worth. And it's like, what? But truly though, what does it mean? Like,
yeah, like we are entrepreneurs. We get in our feels. Like ask me on one day and I'm ready to charge this. Ask me on a bad day and I'm like, what? Like we are up and down roller coasters. So that's why if you can have more of a data, like let the data tell the story on your prices and figure it out from that. It's a better benchmark to go off of.
Much better benchmark. And then you feel more confident too as you're like setting up your prices. And so one thing I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about feelings, what is the difference between fact-based pricing and feelings-based pricing?
Yeah, I mean, fact is going to consider your cost of goods. So a lot of people also forget that as the entrepreneur, you're getting paid twice. You're getting paid if you are still executing the craft. You have to kind of think about I'm going to talk to a service provider. You have to think about if you weren't doing the thing, the client call, the copywriting, the floral design, you would be paying somebody, a contractor, a vendor, their rate, whatever going market rate is to do that. And so then, and you also add on your hard costs, software costs that go into it, the the foam, the stems, anything else. And so you have to look, and those are hard numbers. They also, oh my gosh, last year
Mhm.
our profit margin was just like, it was like Hungry Hippo. It looked totally different because you're going to see your cost of goods may go up sometimes in the year, and then they may come
Mhm.
down. And so again, if you're going off of feelings, then you're not also taking into account those fluctuations that may be happening. So
Mhm.
I think those are the big differences in a facts-based approach and a feelings-based approach. And but I will say there's some element of feelings-based pricing because psychology comes into play in that I have a perspective when I'm paying $97 for an offer that I'm going to get a certain thing. Whereas if I was paying $5,000 for an offer, I have a different expectation.
Mhm.
So that could be feelings, but that's also a little factual too. Like that's human nature. And so you have to, there's a few different things that go into that price point, but those are probably the big differences that I would say I see in them. One recognizes cost of goods and the other does not.
Yeah, no, I think that's again such a good point. I think it just reminds us business owners of like think about yourself as like times when you are pricing your services, whether you're just starting out or you were like, okay, I know it's time to up my prices. Like really take these things into account. Like, of course, take it like think of like your feeling, but don't make that the major priority and don't don't make that the driver in terms of
Yes.
defining your prices. Like you have to literally look at the numbers, look at the hard costs in your business because that's something that I know I messed up on. I would love to hear as well for you what your pricing journey has looked like as a business owner from first starting out to now. You've been like, what, 10 years in the game, over 10
Yep.
years?
Almost
You,
9.
nine.
9 in a
Okay. Yeah.
couple of weeks.
Yes. Okay. Well, yeah, like 9 years in the game. And so, I would love to hear even too with like, what were some of the big like 3 mistakes that you made within your
Whew.
pricing journey?
Just 3. Okay, so first of all, we like a lot of us do it. We price off competitors. When you're going to offer a new thing, you go out and you see, well, what
Mm,
is everybody else charging for it? And that's not all
mhm,
terrible because you do kind of need to see like what is the average going rate for it. But if you just like match that or you try to price beat, like you come in right under it. I think it's Dan Martell that he says it in the book Buy Back Your Time. He's like, don't price yourself the
mhm,
way that other businesses are because they're not making money. I've seen the insides of a lot of businesses, and it's true when you look at, I think it's like 60% of small business owners don't pay themselves a regular paycheck. Like there's a lot of money issues
mm,
in these other businesses that we're looking at when we're like, oh, look at what did she charge? Okay, I'm going to, do that. But that's what a lot of us do, to answer your point about like, that was one of the
mm,
first things I did is when I was trying to figure out what my prices were, I was just like, okay, well, what are other people charging to write a website or anything like that. And
mhm,
then over time, I learned to look at the different aspects that go into it. So that was one thing I
mhm,
think that I've messed up for sure. Let's see. Another pricing issue that I've made, I did not pay myself regularly my first
mm,
like 9 months in business. I didn't know how. I knew how to sell. That was what my background was. But I had no idea what to do with the money on the back side of it. And so I just didn't do anything with it. I just kept it there. To this day, there's like $30,000 that came in that I could not tell you what happened to. It got spent
mm,
in some capacity. I literally have no idea where it went.
mhm,
Because I didn't know. I didn't know how to write myself a paycheck. I didn't know how to make it a regular paycheck. The book Profit First was really helpful in helping me unlock and realize, okay, like the money, this was one of the best things I did was implement that system about everything that comes in goes to one folder.
mhm,
And then you just divvy out based on your needs. So
mm,
if I have a 50% profit margin because you know your cost of goods, cool. Then it's like Dave Ramsey foldering. I put 50% there,
mhm.
10% in the profit, 20% in this folder, owner's draw. That was the most helpful system. It sounds like you've maybe read that too.
Well, yeah, and Mike McAllister was on the show as well, talking about profit first business. So we'll also link that episode
Oh,
in the
he's
show notes
brilliant.
on the Independent Business Podcast. And that episode was so good, and so many business owners have just said such amazing things about him, and truly, it has saved their business.
Yes.
So absolutely, yeah, people love the profit first, and I've started implementing as well some of
So
that, and that
good.
has helped me a lot. And even HoneyBook now we have like our tax saving buckets. So even
Yes.
kind of similarly a little bit to that system of like where when you get in, like when you're getting paid through HoneyBook, it can separate things to help you prepare for taxes. Like even just something like that is such a great way to help you get started and just really think of having a profit first business.
Yes. Like, why are we doing this anyway? Like,
Yeah.
it's and it's not even much. So that's why I like how he talks about it's that 10%. Just put 10% aside, 10%. Now all of a sudden you look up and 6 months have passed and you're like, wow, this is great.
Mhm.
But that comes back to, so pricing, it all comes back to that, because if you're off, if you're not charging yourself so you have any margin on your pricing, you're not going to be able to do that. That's why figuring out like what is going to go in that cost of goods folder.
Mhm.
Two, maybe I'll like give like kind of two other mistakes there. Um, I have messed it up. I think I rectify it quickly because I learned in corporate.
Mhm.
I probably like lawyers, a lot of people in PR, you bill your time. You pay you
Yeah.
so you track your time, track your time, track your time. And I've noticed that they're in the time periods where I don't recognize, or I think, oh, that client project will take 4 hours. Well, no, it actually, narrator, it took her 8 hours. Like you have to know that. It's not like, and we do that as creators. We think, oh, it's fun, or I enjoyed the extra work on it, or I just want to dig a little bit longer on that client project. Well, that comes at a cost. So being really hyper aware of how many
Mhm.
hours that you're putting in every single project and tracking that, and then doing a like revisit. I was at a mastermind the other week, and there was a speaker, and she looks a lot at business strategies, and she says in her business they do a quarterly time audit. And I was like, that's, get in my
Mhm.
bag, you're coming with me, great idea,
I
love
know.
that, I'm gonna
Let's
start doing that. Yes, like because I do think you have to regularly look and make sure that scope creep in your own projects hasn't happened.
Mhm.
So that's another kind of mistake that I've made. And then the last one, I think I've given you four. This is the
No, no, no,
last one.
please keep coming. Keep them
Okay,
coming.
I let bloat happen, and I don't think I rectify it quickly enough. So I started last year, and I'm doing it right now too. I decided, I'm like, that's the February thing. Looking at all of our expenses. So
Mhm.
a lot of those are cost of goods, and just cutting. I pick a number. I got this idea
Mhm.
from Cody Sanchez. She said she'll pick 20% and slice. I was like,
Mhm.
20 sounds excessive, but I
I know.
like the
I'm
number
like, wow.
16. So looked through our costs. I was like, how can I shave 16% off? And
Mhm.
so now I need to do that again. But I think we were just talking before we hit record about AI. Like, how can you shave your costs on your time? Because AI can exponentially increase, and then you can still charge higher value and then argue that the price point is, I'm moving my hands, that a big like my hands out to the side, a big value, but just argue to the client how they're paying just a fraction of that. And you can like that's how you sell, but that you can add more value
Mhm.
by it using AI tools a lot.
And I love that you brought that up because I was literally thinking in my head of like when you track your time, of course you're going to be able to see, obviously how much work you're actually putting into your projects, but even tracking like email, all those different types of things, because then you can literally look to see what you can automate or delegate,
How
all of
can you
that.
make a honeybook template that, that 15-minute, I'll just send an email, when you do that 10 times on a client project, like that adds
That adds up every time.
2 whole hours at least. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and so I love that you brought that up because, like, looking at every single task that you do in your business and what can you automate or delegate, but, like, again, like, use it leveraging AI, like you said, we talked about earlier of, like, how AI is just really playing a much major role in my business, even outside of, like, automation. I mean, you know what I mean? And so I think, again, like, we know that it's there, but we can use it a lot to where, like, again, we're still charging the value, but we're able to cut costs in so many great ways.
Yes. And I think a lot of people sometimes they see the number they should be pricing at and they
Mhm.
like freak out. I can't, people won't pay that. They will if you can give like how, instead of figuring out how to like, yes, you need to think about like how to cull down on the price as much as possible, but how can you stack that puppy with even more value? Like how can you
Yes.
exponentially give more? How can you, there's a lot of sawdust that falls off your desk in the middle of creating something that could
Mhm.
be repackaged and packaged and given to the client as a deliverable that they would find valuable. So I think seeing your proper margins in price kind of creatively has to push you to be like, all right, it's a big number. So how are we going to actually show up and deliver on that?
Yes, 1000%. And so a question I want to ask you is because I have done this before, but so I was approached to do a project. It was somebody who had reached out to me and they were like, hey, like, this is an hourly based project. It was like with the government within their state. And so she was looking for contractors and she's like, hey, what's your hourly? And we talked earlier how I've been on the cusp of like really adjusting a lot of my prices and changing it. And so I was okay, my hourly rate. I should have used a lot of what you suggested of like looking at hard costs and all that stuff. I went to Chat GPT. And so, however,
What
I
they say?
first started with Chat GPT. I first was like, hey, this is a project. What do storytelling strategists on average charge based on experience? Like, that's what I asked it first.
Okay.
And so then it gave me numbers based on experience. And I said, okay, cool. This is where I'm at. So I said, this is where I'm at. And then it asked me prompts. Because I told it, I said, ask me questions to help me figure out what would be the right cost so that I'm not struggling out here, right? So then I'm not pissed off that I undercharged and I'm not enjoying the work, right? Like we can all I've absolutely have been in projects where I felt resentment of like, I should have charged more. And so I literally just explained it to Chat GPT and it asked me questions of like, okay, what are your hard costs? Like how much do you pay? Like your bills and this and that. And I was like, all right, cool. And it literally gave me the number.
Do you like the number? You felt
I
good about the
did.
number?
I actually
That's
added a
awesome.
little bit more to it, and then
Yes.
and then I
shipped that
gave
puppy.
the number. But yeah, I felt great about the number.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I'm like, again, it can really be like your business partner, and really, again, like really help with that. So all that to say was, I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
I love it. I think that so I would probably, like we were saying too earlier, ChatGPT is the best sparring partner. So I think what I would do is like figure out my hourly and then ask it like, so that's the thing too, your hourly depends on what you're doing. Like if there's some tasks that I'm doing in my business that are worth $1 sign. There's other tasks that I'm doing that are worth $4 signs in my business. And so getting clear on like, what is the task at hand for your hourly? I think for business owners, the best way to figure out your hourly rate is to take what you need to make in a year, like what is your salary, and divide it by a number of hours worked. So if your business is your full-time thing, 2,000 hours is a good number to divide it by. So like 100,000, if you made $100,000 a year and you worked a full-time job, your hourly rate would be about $50 an hour. If a lot of people in my audience, because I've done this exercise in my membership before, and a lot of people are moms or doing part-time. And so I actually run my hourly rate off 1,200 hours because that fudges for holidays. Like a 2,000 hour year is like, you're going, baby. But I think a lot of us we created our businesses to have the lifestyle freedom and work the number of hours that we want to. Yeah. So that's the better number that I've found, is dividing it. And that number I keep because it helps me remember, like that's my CEO number for my hourly rate. So if what I'm doing is at that value point, I think I'm allowed to do it. But if I could pay somebody a third or a half of that and have the job done, I really need to strongly consider not doing that thing.
Yeah. Oh, that is so good. And that's such a good point.
Time.
I love that. And that would have been, again, because then I would have had and still I was happy with the result anyways. But again, like really, how can we improve? And so like, yeah, like I should have thought first of those things and then placed it into Chat GPT, because to your point, yeah, there are smaller tasks that aren't going to equate to the same, like in terms of cost. And so that's such a good point. Such a good way to look at it. And again, like you can leverage, I love that you call it Chatty G.
Chatty G.
Chatty G. But I love that. I think that's such a great way to look at it. And so we talked about this earlier too before recording, but I wanted to bring it into the conversation of, for business owners that are like, I've been in the game for a while, I think it's time for me to raise my prices. Yeah. Or I guess, what are some flags that we need to look out for that indicates that it's time for us to raise our prices? That's one question.
Yes.
And then two, what are some things we should be looking at again to like make those steps to raise our prices?
So good. Okay. I think if you're getting like 75% close rate, you need to up your price. And that's hard. I think a lot of us, and again, I'm speaking for like a lot of our students and our members and our clients, a lot of y'all listening, you get on the phone with somebody, you can sell them. You can sell ice to a polar bear. Like you're good on the phone. And so I think it does bring in a little bit of a level of rejection when you think about raising your price. But if you are, I would say, if you're closing about 70% of your leads, I would consider upping it a little. It's also a good question to ask. Like, we're looking at everything right now, and I'm thinking, how can we, especially just with the advent of AI, like I said, how can we continue to give that value but
Mm-hmm.
shave hours down? Like, if this
Mm-hmm.
costs, like, we know some of our big messaging projects and campaigns cost 25 hours in manpower to produce. But if we're now able to use AI to cull that down to 18 hours, then does the price still need to be that? Or can I be a little bit more flexible? Or can I keep the price point where it is and just like mac daddy out the value? Because we are still seeing people willing to pay that price point. So, like, can I get them even more for more bang for their buck? So, those are probably two ways that I think about raising prices. I think it's healthy to consider raising. I mean, it happens where every few years you look up and you're like, oh, we haven't raised our prices at all. And we also have some offers where I'm pretty much like, nope, it's staying there. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is the price point that we're going to play the game at that price point. And I think that's a healthy place to be at too.
Yeah, I like that. Those are really realistic benchmarkers to look at to where, because sometimes too, I didn't even realize I needed to raise my price until somebody told me. And I think and I know I'm not the only one as a business owner that has been through that, where all of a sudden I don't realize the value of what I'm offering. I think sometimes we
Yeah.
also um, forget our talents, just how
Yeah.
talented we are. And so like I said earlier, like I was having somebody who's been helping me revamp the SEO on my website. And, she did my sales page and she just was like, wait, what do you get? And I like listed everything out for her. So she's like, let me get this straight. And she listed, it was like quite a list. And she's like, you're getting this. And then you're like, people are getting this. And then you're charging that.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah. She's like, you need to up
I love
that.
it. I love it. We all need friends to tell us that. I think that, yes, raising our prices is something to think about. But I think the bigger question the more I'm around like more higher level entrepreneurs and like how they think, and it
Mhm,
blows my mind, like it's profit margin. It is like, that is the game. Like, how it's not
mhm.
like, and yeah, because 6-figure this, 7-figure that. Sure, that was your revenue. What were your margins?
Yeah.
Like, how can you run it 60-40? How can you run it 50-50? Like,
Mhm,
don't like, how can you shave down that and just have as fat a profit margin as possible? I cannot remember who it was, but she said one time on Instagram Reel, like, having a big team isn't a flex that you think it is. And I it's like kind of that same thought with like pricing and your revenue. Like, it's not the flex you think it is. The real flex is like, what are your margins and how lean
mhm.
can you run? Ugh, that's so fun to think through.
Yeah, but I think also too a lot of business owners need to hear that because I feel like so much right now in our industry, especially, like that's a lot of people lead with the
Yeah.
profit. Like I am, a multi six-figure business owner and this and that. And like there's so much more to the story
Yes.
that we are not aware of. And I think a lot of us as business owners, I know, and I've seen in the conversations in the room, like a lot of business owners are very tired of hearing that of like, what's the real story behind it? For
Yeah.
example, what is your profit margin? And then also, is this before taxes or after taxes? Like, what
Yes.
is the real story? Because I think a lot of people, we want transparency, we want that rawness and that realness. And I think again, like that really number one just opens up a clearer picture for business owners of like, okay, you don't have to be like so focused on the right, like what is your profit? Like there's other factors that are so important to really consider when you're looking at just the finances of your business and how you want to be able to make more money. So I really
Amen.
love that you brought that up.
I love
Love
it. And
that.
that 60-40, like 60-40 is my dream margin to run at.
Yeah.
We did not hit that last year. We were
Mm,
we were much higher to 70.
mm,
But that first number, I want to shout out Sheena Skidmore, and she does finances for creative. She was the first name
mhm,
that put that 60-40 on my radar. And I
mhm,
remember when I first heard it, I was like, there is absolutely no way that I can run at those kind of margins in a creative business.
mhm,
Um, because you just, yeah, you think like, I can't charge, I can't, it's an envelope. I can't charge more than 50 cents for it with
mhm.
calligraphy on it. But you have to realize what things are worth. And
Yeah.
if you want to do this and if you want to make money with it, figuring out, like, people will always, I tell my students this all the time, people will always pay to have a problem solved if it's a real problem for them.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. What is your foolproof formula for pricing yourself to be successful and sustainable as a business owner?
Okay, so what I do is I take a spreadsheet, it's tab 2 on my spreadsheet that I go to all
Yeah.
the time with finances, and I first up figure out the hard costs.
Mm,
So what are the, again, physical people? I think y'all it's easy for us to think through like the film, the camera, that kind of thing. If it is, I get this question a lot. If it is something that you are using on multiple people, whether it is a piece of like HoneyBook, but we use for all of our
mhm,
clients, a camera, but I use for all of my clients, then I take and with a physical product, you should probably count in depreciation, but like I kind of take the costs for that
mhm,
like and divvy it up by if we take on 24 full service clients a year, divide it by 24. So I know like, okay, I pay $1,000 for that software a year, but 1/24th of it is really what it costs the client.
mhm,
So that's the first thing that I figure out. And then I drop down and I figure out what are the labor costs that go
mhm,
into it. So what are the labor costs when Ashlyn, the copywriter, is working on it?
mhm,
And her rate, I'm just going to round up and pull some numbers. Her rate is $200 an hour. When is, say it were me doing this piece of it, what is the gifting of the client packages? Well, gifting is not a $200 an hour gig. It's wrapping paper. I could pay
mhm,
my 6-year-old son to, so what is that cost? What is admin costs that go into it? So like, what are the different hats that you wear if it's you? Because, and you have to think that way, because if you were, and the goal, you're trying to replace yourself at different places in business. So if you were going to pay somebody else to do those, what's the going rate? What could you
mhm,
pay? Should you pay somebody $20 an hour to wrap presents, whatever it is? Figuring that out, take that, and then what I would do is double it and add
mhm,
20%. So
mm,
that is my foolproof formula. And then that gives you so much room to run specials, to run like that's what I see a lot of people get to where they come to me and we're talking about, doing a promotion campaign or launching. And if there's no wiggle room at all to come down and give a little coupon or, run a few times a year, and all we can do is like add an extra, it's nice to be able to have the freedom to pull back a little bit and run a sale or run a
mhm,
promo. But then it accommodates your room for taxes, it accommodates a little 10% profit margin, and it gives you room to reinvest. So that's a really good like start there, and then you're allowed to bring your feelings back into the chat and see like, okay, looking at that number, like, because we do have, I will say this too, we have one offer where I run that on and I'm like,
mhm,
I'm not comfortable charging that. I want that price to be at $1,000, even though, and I just have to know the margins on that offer are not where I really want them to be, but that's okay because then they'll pull into another offer.
mm.
But at least if you can start with the formula and then let your feelings back in, that's helpful.
Yes, I love that. And I think again, it's that foundational piece. And you're thinking too, like business owners, like if you are listening and you're like, hey, I'm a little bit early in the game, and you're like, okay, well, how do I figure out my labor costs? We talked about that earlier with the time tracking. So like really make sure then that's where you're clear. But I love that you shared that because that's also laying the foundation of you building a team. Like if you're
Yes.
wanting to scale,
Yes.
you know
Which,
what I mean?
yes.
And that's the hardest piece is trying to figure out when you're wanting to bring somebody on how much to charge them. But if you've already done that time tracking so you can really just get a realistic picture of the labor cost, then you can confidently go in and be like, okay, I know exactly who I'm looking for. I know exactly what I want them to do. And I know exactly how much I'm going to like pay them.
Preach. Yes.
Yes.
And
Yep.
that
Which I think,
happens sooner than like, wouldn't you say? I feel like the whole hiring conversation or bringing on somebody to help, even in just a support capacity, not as an employee, nothing like that, just to like share a little bit of the labor load or help you stay in your zone, which is like the actual like crafting and deliverable and take some of the admin off.
mm-hmm.
Like that happens a lot sooner than you think in your business. And I don't know, I always thought that was like a big girl problem. And then it creeps up on you and you're like, I am getting nothing done. I'm not doing the thing that I set out to do because I'm, you know, doing all these other things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1000%. And I love that because it's true. It creeps up on you. And then you like realize like you don't realize that you need it until you need it. And I think
Hmm.
again, like when you're actually taking the time to really put intentionality between your prices going fact-based versus instead of feelings,
Yes.
right? And letting that be your driver, then you're going to feel much more confident when that time does come. Because like I know myself, I was like, I need to hire somebody. And I did not look at any of these numbers.
Me either at
I
first.
did not. I just hurried up and found somebody. And I was like, yeah,
Yep.
that this is a good enough rate. But then you're like month per month, it compounds, like it starts
Yes.
to add up. And then you're like, oh, like I need to
There
really
go the
go see.
margins.
You got to go look at the margin. Like, do I have the capacity? And I'll be transparent. Like, this is not the first time I tried to hire somebody and I've had to let them go after a
Yep.
month or two because I was like, damn, I did not make it far.
I love that you said, because yes, that is what, and I've messed up that too. I'd bring in somebody to help before I like figured all this out. And I had them at a rate where then you look at it and you're like, whoa, this is not going to be sustainable. And you either have to have that hard conversation or you have to just stick with it and then, get creative somewhere
Get
else.
creative and
But
make more money.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
1000%. And I learned that. And so now I've had somebody who writes my blogs, manages my Pinterest and stuff like that. Like I've worked with her now for a year over a year now. And I was just so excited to make it there because I was like, but I was watching my numbers the
yeah,
whole time because again, like I was like, I really need her and I don't want to be back in that place. And I'm like, even if it's just that one person, right? Just that one person. And
yes,
so I think starting small there. And then I'm like working with an OBM and like figuring that out, but I'm starting small there.
awesome.
So like, I'm starting very small. So I think that's to the point of like, if you're not there, you're going to get there and really implement these foundational things. So you're not going to end up making the mistakes that I made. Cause I feel like if I would have done that earlier, it would have saved me a lot. Like the things that you suggested, it would have saved me a lot of headache. And then also too, like you can start small, like start small, start from there and work your way up. Like you don't have to. And that was my mistake where I just jumped in
Oh,
and then
yeah,
I'm going to hire the,
you think you're supposed to, employee no, like, I love that, start small. I still think team building is probably the hardest part of business ownership,
Mhm.
but, like, start with a project and this gives you, especially if it's your client service or it's part of your, like, not bringing them on to necessarily do a marketing strategy or
Mm,
whatever, but, like, bring on somebody. I learned that, I mentioned him earlier, Dan Martell talks about that in Buy Back Your Time. And I
mhm.
read it and I was like, that's why. That's why it broke down sometimes, because I would bring in somebody that was trying to do something without really fixing the like fulfillment
Mm,
process. And if
mhm.
you can bring in somebody to help you on the fulfillment, then you get to kind of pull up the ladder to more marketing and sales and leadership stuff and get a little bit out of the weeds. But it gives you the freedom and the know-how to bring them in. That was some great advice that I
Yeah.
didn't get until late, but bring somebody in for a project
Oh, that's so
before
good.
you pull them in on like any kind of employee status or first, like date before you
Oh,
get
yeah.
married.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good point because also too, like you get to understand people's work styles, what type of
Mhm.
leader you are, and all that type of stuff. Like I should have done that too, but here we
I
go. We
know.
learn.
I know.
Hindsight is 2020. So,
Amen.
yes, that is such a good point. And so for business owners, right, we raise our prices, and it is always a scary thing.
Yes.
And I think the biggest part I want to ask is how do we gain our confidence so that when people do question our prices, right? Like, because
Yeah.
it's going to happen on a sales call. It always does. And so, how do we gain our confidence within our new prices so that if people do approach us and like, ooh, like that's expensive, this and that. And I remembered like when I first started out, I used to be like, okay, well, like maybe. And now I'm
Oh my
like,
gosh,
nah,
yeah.
you gonna pay me
Oh my
or
god.
don't. Like, you know what I mean? But I think I want us to talk about like that confidence where like we are when we do have our new pricing, how do we stick to our guns and feel just really good about it so that we are advocating for ourselves more as a business owner?
Okay, I just like scribbled furiously on a sticky note, like stick a
Yeah.
quarter in me. I freaking love sales calls. I
Yeah.
love this. I love this question. So I think first of all, the confidence is going to come when you know that number, when you know your cost of goods, like because when you do a feelings based price, you're kind of like, and if anybody questions it, well, then you're a house of cards. You don't know why you have that price. I don't know.
Mhm.
She charged it. I thought I'd charge it too. So of course I'll
Mhm.
negotiate with you. I used to be so afraid on sales calls to say my price and my number that I would always end the call. I would say, like, all right, I'm going to make you a proposal and I'll get back to you. No, you need to
Mhm.
go on a discovery call or a sales call. And by the end of it, you need to say, that package is $9,750. We can break that into 3 payments each.
Mhm.
Like, you need to be able to look them in the eye, not totally sweat through your shirt, and say your number to them. And I didn't do that for years because I was
Mm.
just terrified. So, what got me over that hump, first of all, was proper pricing. So, I understand how to how I came to that number. So like come at me. Like and if you not that they would, but just like just being able to be like, no, like I know that this is what it costs. This is what goes into it. I think one thing that helps too, I am a big fan of listing your pricing on your website or at least communicating some sort of radar.
Mhm.
I've compared it to, when you go to a fancy restaurant and it says like market price for the
Mhm.
fish, and you're like, especially if you're with a group of people you don't know, it's like kind of, like what if it's like $150 fish? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's psychological. A lot of times if we don't know the price or we don't see it, we assume that it's high or that we can't afford it. So if you're able to even say, I've told like wedding people in our industry, can you give them a percentage of budget? Most of our brides spend 4% of their entire budget on paper, or
Mhm.
most of our clients spend between $1,000 and $5,000. Our average price starts at 10,000. Like, can you give them some sort of, this is when the copywriter in me comes out, because the whole purpose of that page is to get them to the next step in your process, which is likely getting them on that discovery call. So
Mhm.
I like to give people some sort of sticker range. So when they do
Mhm.
get on the call with you, they're not like completely sticker shocked. And then I think on the call itself, doing a little bit of price anchoring is helpful as well, where and I teach our sales call script. Like I love sales calls, and I think it's because I screwed them up for years. And so I was
Mhm.
like, dang it, I got to figure this out. And if you can, what's helped me is if I had one with a client this morning and being able to say, okay, some people have brought us in and spent this amount of money and we've done all this kind of stuff. But like, if you can honestly tell them, some people pay that. I don't think you need that. I think you need this. It is this price point, and they're able to kind of anchor in their head. And obviously, you'll do that with integrity and not
Mhm.
inflate prices or make up some story. But I think that helps people as well, and it reminds you like the value that you're bringing to them. So those are a few things that have really helped me with saying that number on the call and not 100% freaking out, or just not. I mean, I did it for years. I wouldn't say the number because I was like, they're going to say no, or I can't. I'm so scared to even say my price that I would rather just type it and send it in an email. And
Mhm.
so, getting over that is just, that's a boss level next step up that if you can, it feels really good.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Such good tips. And like number one, again, if you go back and actually take the time to lay out your pricing, you're gonna feel really confident about that number. But also, yeah, I have my prices on my
Love it.
my website. And so I
Yeah.
think again, like business, I know that still as a topic of conversation for
Yeah.
business owners, whether to have pricing on your website or not. I am a yes to that, but I love that even like people, if they aren't, like give a range, like give a marker that where
Give a
they
marker. That's a
understand.
good word.
Yes, like give them a marker to where they really understand, okay, like can I meet this or not? Right. Cause also too,
Yeah.
that's gonna save more of your time and their time, right? You don't want to be in these sales calls, but they may not even be like they may not be a fit for you at all price
Right.
wise,
Right.
you know. And so I think that's why I'm like, just put it on your site or at least give them a marker to where like they're crystal clear. Is there anything else that business owners should take into account for their pricing?
Yeah, like I study sales calls. Learn how to do a sales
Mm,
call. Learn how to say your price with assurance on a phone call. Um that just, I think it's a lost art. Or it's,
mm,
we think about sales and sales calls, and a lot of, you'll think about, like the guy that calls you to like reduce your phone bill or whatever, but like
mm,
you can do them
mhm,
really well. And like your sales call doesn't have to turn into like a strategy call or a coaching call, or like
mhm,
it can be a really great time of service with your clientele, and it doesn't have to be
mhm,
long. Like you can do it in 20 minutes. Remember, you're tracking your time. So yeah, I would say like that's something I messed up on. I didn't really start getting into the weeds on learning how to do those well. And then your system just becomes so good. Like our honeybook, we send out our inquiry process. Somebody fills out an application, they get the client magazine that's now all in honeybook. And
mhm,
then we send them after a proposal that, again, we're just shaving as much time off. It feels very custom and white glove, which is our goal with our clients. They're paying a lot of money, but we
mhm,
lean a lot on honeybook templates to do that. And
mm.
yeah, I'm really grateful for the tools that are there, because I'm always looking at how many hours something that
Yes.
takes. But I want that like high end feel when people are going through the process.
Yes. Oh, love that. That's such great advice. And so for you now, like I said, 9 years in the game, what are your pricing challenges? Like you said earlier, like right profit
Mm,
margin. What are some pricing things that you are working through right now? Has
that's
anything like
good.
unexpectedly come up where you're like, oh, or like, yeah.
That's good. I think I sometimes price something and then I look up and I've over delivered
Mm,
And I think a lot of us do that. I'm not like saying that to like brag or pat myself. I think a lot of us are just, you look up and you're like, well, shoot, I was just going to spend, an hour a week on that. And here I have, so I think that's one thing now is making sure like once I put like sticking to it, I guess, putting it like
mm,
for a membership or for a subscription, how to over deliver, but also
mhm,
not bust the time bank. That's it. That's what I'm trying to figure out now. So how can you like
mm,
add more value, add more value? One thing that's really helpful, Myron Golden talks about this is totally from him. I've
mhm,
heard him talk about the idea of anyway offers. And I love that. What were you going to
mm.
create anyway? And then how can you like, what were you already going to make? What were you already going to do? And then how can you bake that in? So that's kind of a new approach that I'm bringing to say like our weekly copy template subscription or to my membership is, I need to give and I want to over deliver in those, but I also can't, all of a sudden spend 10 hours a week on one of those because I've got other duties. So then how can I give them value by giving them things that I was already making anyway? I loved that.
Yeah,
Good old Myron
love
Golden.
that. I
Yeah.
know, I just discovered him last year. I heard him speak at a conference, and I was, like,
So good.
blown away. He's
Yeah.
phenomenal. So we will also be linking Myron Goldman in the show
Good stuff.
notes to definitely check it out. Yeah, no, I love that. And thank you so much for your transparency. I think it just goes to show that as business owners, no matter what, like no matter what level that you're at, you're always learning. You're always changing,
Amen.
adjusting, learning new things where you're being molded, right? Every single time. And so I love that you were just sharing that as somebody who's like again, you've been in the game, like, very
I'm always
successful
messing up.
entrepreneur. And you're like, I still got to figure out this pricing, right? Like, I think it's such an important thing to share. So thank you for that. Okay. So on the Unbreakable Business Podcast, we now do rapid fire questions. If you were pricing a product like a service in a highly competitive market, what's one tactic you'd use to stand out?
See how I can max out value. So I would look and see
Ooh.
what are other people doing, and then how can I prove myself even more of an expert or a deliverer. I think a lot of us forget that the point of an entrepreneurship role, like we're solving people's problems. So by
Mm,
just like adding or baking in stuff that doesn't solve their problem.
mhm,
And so I think like I would just like obsess with figuring out what their problem is and then build to
mhm.
deliver on that. I'll say, sorry, now I'm not turning this into rapid fire.
Nope, it's not go. It's still good though.
Okay. I think a lot of us build the thing and then try to ship it out. And I really like kind of how you were talking about how you built your course. You did the beta, you
Mhm,
figured it out, and then now you're going to ship that. That is how I love approaching. I'm going to say product development, but it would be service development too. Like I
mhm,
let listen, build. So I'll even write the sales page first. I love doing that.
mhm,
Write your sales page first. Write this, and then go build the thing that you promise because you heard people, and you're writing from what you heard them say, I need this. Okay. So smile and nod and say, I mean, theoretically, and say, okay, I can deliver on these points and then go
mhm.
build the thing to fill that. Ugh, I've done it both ways and it always feels better that
That
way.
way. Yeah, because then also too, it's kind of like your anchor. It
Yes.
keeps you anchored because again, when like building my core, like there were times I strayed and I was like, I don't know. And the
Yeah.
beta helped so much. But even too though, like even before you test out a product or a service, that is still such a great way where like, okay, then it also helps you like nail down of like what worked and what didn't work when you
Mm-hmm.
started off with the sales page. Cause then like again, it keeps you anchored of like this is exactly the value that you're creating. So you're creating like you're creating the systems, the mechanisms, whatever it is to give that value. And so I think that's a unique way. Okay, I love that. And that's something I'm definitely going to consider now for my next, well, I was going to say product, but what about if it's a digital product? What would you change?
I would
Anything?
probably do the same thing. I would say the
Okay.
second thing that I would say is I would caveat it and stay streamlined. Their business in a
Mm,
box courses or like do it all jackknife products or services just are not it anymore. Solve a
yeah.
very specific acute problem
Hmm.
really well and stay on, and that's hard to do because like, for example, digital product, when you're building a course, you want to add in this bonus and that bonus and like
Hmm.
stay on message, stay
Yes.
on that problem, and that'll make it stand out in the market more because there's the dilution is not a thing. It's that
Yes.
it messes. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. You are making this rapid fire everything. Okay. All right. So you said this earlier, but I want to know the number. Be real. Okay. How much did you charge for your first offer? Like when you think of what was the
Oh,
number?
I mean, I was charging like $150 an article to write anything you would ask me for.
Really? Does that
Yeah,
make you
like
feel
I need an about page. I need an article. I would write articles for magazines. I would write $80 a blog. Would it even be 80? It might have been 80 for a package of like 4 blogs.
wow.
Oh yeah, you named it. I would do it. Yeah.
Your face.
And that's how I wound up in the position my first year where I was like, I worked 7 days a week. I was
Yeah.
exhausted. I had I can't even remember how many clients I had that first year. Way too many. And my husband and I, at the end of the year, he was like, "We cannot do this. Like, you're not. We are not a single income family. We just got married. We need your paycheck, in fact." And it was not working. So
Oh my goodness. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That was good. Okay.
yeah.
Um, now we did talk about this earlier, but how often should entrepreneurs be raising their prices? I know we talked about the flags, but how often?
I would say a good every year look
Mm.
and see.
Psychological pricing, with like the $9.99 instead of $10. What are your honest thoughts on that?
I love it. I think you'll see either,
Mm,
and you'll find a psychological argument to back up either one.
mhm,
I like the 9. I think I end a lot of prices in 9. I also think that saying a good round number people like as well. I've kind
mhm,
of come more to where I do use round numbers.
mhm,
I also will say this on pricing because like when you're building, especially like a digital offer and you're giving the value point
mhm,
of like all the different individual pieces, make
mhm,
sure that you've sold something at that price. Like, have you sold that thing at that price point before? Like, don't inflate
mhm,
these prices or pull them out. Like, you have to, especially now with the FTC stepping in and how they did last year, you need to be able to show like that thing is worth $97 because I've sold it at $97 or I've sold a very similar offer at $97 before. So yeah, I'll do 7s and 9s, and then
mhm.
sometimes I'll do round numbers.
Okay, okay. But I like that you shared that though, because I think again, it's just like talking about like ethically pricing, because I do think I found myself this earlier is that I full transparency, I would like get into scarcity and I'm like, well, I want to make more money. So I would, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Right. And I just love that you shared that of like just wanting to highlight of like, okay, business owners, like don't inflate the price if it's something that you've never offered at that number before, right? Again, like what you said earlier, like really leading from a place of value and then ethically. And like when you are leading from a place of service and being ethical about your pricing, like it's going to pay off for you in the long run. So
Feels
I
good.
love that you
Yep.
shared that. All right, last one. What's one thing you think business owners should stop apologizing for when it comes to pricing?
Profit margin.
Mm,
Like, duh. This is not you I don't know. This concept that like I shouldn't profit. Then why the heck are
yes.
you in business? Like, then just give it for free
Yes.
or just do a trade. Like, no, you have to have a profit margin. You are in business
Mhm,
to make a profit. That is the point of business. You don't need to be vilified for that. You don't need to be Michael Hyatt has a book called Entrepreneurs Will Save the World. Like, you are giving by giving other people job opportunities, by giving incredible value to people with your products and service. You are giving. You like to solve problems, you're solving problems. Like, don't this idea that you shouldn't make money as well is so weird. His book like tackles that really well. But don't apologize for like having some
yes.
profit margin in there. If anything, I feel like you should be that. Like, if you're a creative visionary thinker and you love people, like, yes, then you're kind of the person that I want money in your hands, because I feel like you're gonna
Mhm.
use it well and steward it ethically. And so yeah, I don't think we need to apologize for that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, that was so fun. This
That
is
was
such a good
fun.
rapid fire because it's a rapid fire. And then my listeners are gonna be like, what? Okay, well, you're wild. Like you're being
It's like
annoying. Stop.
rapid-ish fire.
I like this is rapid fire. No, this was amazing. I have loved it. Okay, so every question that we love to end each episode with is what does having an unbreakable business mean to you?
I can walk away. I can walk
Mm,
away and go play with my kids. And summertime's coming up as we're recording this. And I'm like, they're not little long. And I'm seeing it. I have 3 kids. And I have loved the blessing of being able to build a business where I can walk away. And I see that more and more every year.
I love that. Oh, Ashlyn, thank you. Thank you for so coming on the show. Number one, I'm excited to see you next month at the Creative Educator Conference. It's going to be so good.
It's going to be popping.
And I know it's going to be amazing. And I just thank you so much for being here and stopping by and just sharing your wisdom. It's always so fun to have you here.
It is mutual. It's such an honor. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So people that want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yes, my website's ashlynwrites.com, and Ashlyn S. Carter is my Instagram handle. Those are pretty much the 2 spots I hang out.
Yes. And also, y'all sign for a newsletter because it is so good. You
Thank
guys,
you.
I read her emails every single time you send it, I always open. I'm like, oh. because it's filled with so much value, high packed, like literally it's so good. So I'm going to just put a shameless plug in there too. Sign up for her email list, y'all, because you're going to get really, really good value. So
I appreciate that. Full transparency. That's one of those things I'm like, I really need to get this to where it doesn't take a full day, but it does. But it's fun. I love it.
I mean, but it's so good. So yes, Ashlyn, thank you so much again. And for everybody tuning in, until next time. Thank you so much for tapping in today's episode on the Unbreakable Business Podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like and subscribe. Do not forget to download our free tax filing checklist to help you get prepared and organized for tax season. And I will see you next time.